Hello and welcome back to the Journey Through Sword of Moonlight games, and welcome to the JC Bailey Chronicles. When I initially started this little video series, listed out all the Sword of Moonlight games and put them in order, I honestly didn't notice this particular block of games. Out of 5 games made between 2013 and 2017, 4 of them were made by the same developer, JC Bailey. The 5th one was Morathea by Ben Connolly, who I take this time to apologize to because I'm gonna skip your game for now. I'm sorry, it's just putting all of JC's games in their own video just makes sense. The setup is right there. I swear I'll get around to your game sometime later, and maybe even first the next video, so long as the community doesn't discover any more lost games or something. But with that, Morathea respectfully gets put on the back burner, and we had 4 games to look at, all made by the same guy. I think this could be really interesting. It gives us a chance to see how JC developed as a game designer. And because I know they're definitely gonna watch it, congrats JC, you got your own video basically just by circumstance. For the non-JC Bailey watchers, while previous Sword of Moonlight games sometimes connected themselves to Kingsfield, the following games are, more often than not, very tied to them. There will be some spoilers for those games, and it might help you to know a little bit about the Kingsfield series going in, if you haven't played them for yourselves. Regardless, here's a little lore reminder. Kingsfield 1 starred John Alfred Forrester delving into the royal tomb at the Kingdom of Verdite, being granted the Moonlight Sword by the Dragon Gyra, and using it to kill the corrupted Reinhardt III. Kingsfield 2 had you play as Alexander Thornton Reginix, Prince of Granatyki. The Moonlight Sword had been stolen by the forces of Necron using the power of the Dragon Gyra, so you journeyed to the island of Melanaut to defeat them and get it back. Finally, Kingsfield 3 throws us for a bit of a twist. John Forrester has turned evil, the Moonlight Sword was shattered, and Alexander sacrifices himself to seal Verdite Castle. You play as John's son Lyle, and eventually defeat the Dragon Seath. That's basically all you really need to know in terms of this video. There's more that could be said of course, but this video is not a lore dump. With all that preamble out of the way, let's get into it. Let's dive into our first Sword of Moonlight game of the video and see where JC Bailey started. The first game on the docket is Fall of Verdite, a prequel to Kingsfield 3, or to be more precise, its prologue. The game's opening cinematic depicts a scene where Alexander confronts the recently turned evil John Forrester. Fall of Verdite attempts to make this part of the story playable. You take on the role of Alexander as he makes his way through the castle towards that confrontation. Verdite Castle is actually an endgame area in Kingsfield 3, and Fall of Verdite recreates it in the Sword of Moonlight engine. I don't have the exact maps of each game to directly compare them, but from what I see, this is a pretty good recreation. The dev even tries to use similar enemy types despite the engine's limitations. Besides the similar maps, there's even some lore to be found, if you want to call it that. While Fall of Verdite doesn't have much of a story, there's NPCs from Kingsfield 3 you can find, like the old man who used to make pies for the castle. The 5 fans of Kingsfield 3 out there are really going to have a good time. Aside from that though, what do I really have to say in terms of Fall of Verdite? It's a bit of a weird point, but one of the things that stood out to me was that the game didn't feel like it had any real problems. It wasn't unbalanced, or overly long, or required grinding, or had a part that was hard to figure out. It was just a competent little adventure that lasts 1 to 2 hours. You just make your way through the castle, find all the fun nods to Kingsfield 3, and then you meet the evil king and the cutscene from Kingsfield 3 plays. I guess I'm a little disappointed there's no final fight. The game feels a little anticlimactic, but as the first project used to learn the engine, it's good. If you're a fan of Kingsfield 3, this is a fun little way to spend an afternoon. But don't worry if you thought that section was a little short. Fall of Verdite was more of an appetizer. Time for something of a much bigger scope. Keeping up the trend of some developers trying to remake or build around Kingsfield 2, we have Return to Melanaut, a sequel set 20 years after Kingsfield 3. But as the name suggests, we aren't finding ourselves exploring the lands of Verdite, but returning to the island of Melanaut. A light from the sky and a dark fog has descended on the land, and the now King Lyle led a force of knights to the island to fight the coming evil. But a year has passed and no one's heard from the king. So you, Prince of Verdite, journey to the island yourself to find your father and stop whatever's going on. And welcome to Melanaut. It's the island we all know and love by this point. It's cool to see this starting area brightly lit. We can talk to the soldier here and he'll give us 500 gold to buy stuff. We can look around and take in the familiar sights. And look, a giant plant mimicking the giant squid. But unfortunately for them, this is the SOM engine. Everything staggers in the SOM engine. The first thing I do is spend a few minutes stabbing this plant over and over again until it dies. It levels me up multiple times, and it felt pretty good to finally be able to do that. Fantasy fulfillment over, it's business as usual. Having played Kingsfield 2 before, it felt pretty cool to explore the island once again. While Dark Destiny was pretty close to Kingsfield 2 in terms of its layout, Return to Melanaut feels like an even more faithful recreation. It's still not one-to-one, mind you, but I found myself able to navigate the island no problem. As I hinted at before, according to the dev, they started with making recreations like this in Fall of Verdite to help them learn the engine and gain experience. I think they turned out well, and could imagine having a sense of nostalgia if I had played the Kingsfield series in my childhood. But, for the record, JC also took the time to include an original area. Look out for hidden walls around the starting zone, and you'll probably be able to find it. Journeying around, I was able to meet a bunch of the island's old residents all grown up and see a bunch of familiar places. It's a pretty cool feeling. The goal is once again to journey to the island's depths, and I found myself able to do so with relative ease. This feels like an honest fan game of Kingsfield 2. But those are just the broad strokes. What about the specifics? How is Return to Melanaut? In summary, it's good. It replicates the levels of Kingsfield 2 well, doesn't have any major balancing problems with combat, and it attempts to tell a decent story tied to the Kingsfield lore. It's quite solid, if honestly not feeling all that original in some aspects. If someone was a fan of Kingsfield 2 and wanted to try a song game, this would be a decent recommendation. But besides all that, the thing about Return to Melanaut is that it's a little odd in some ways. One of the first things I noticed while playing the game is that enemies weren't dropping gold. I mean, I was given some gold at the start of the game, but it wasn't getting any more, not unless I wanted to start farming item drops and selling those. I eventually found a side quest that gave me some more gold, but besides that, nothing. What gives? I can barely amass any funds at all, never mind enough to buy anything expensive. What were these shops for if I couldn't get gold? Well, the good news is I was able to just ask the dev themselves. I had actually seen it brought up in an old forum post, but JC confirmed that gold is loaded in their games because it caused some kind of bug in the engine. From what I know of the engine and its quirks, this tracks. I mean, other games clearly found a way to make it work, but I can follow the logic. They also clarified that shops are in the game more so for items than equipment, though the option for equipment is there in case the player couldn't find it in the world. I was able to regularly find new gear without issue, but I guess it's nice for the option to be there. Actually, this brings me to an even odder and more pedantic complaint than I think I've ever had in these videos. Let's take a moment to talk about equipment stats. If you pick up a general song game, you'll see weapons do slashing, stabbing, and crushing damage. Then there's all the elements, and those are the damage types. If you play enough song games, you'll start to notice there isn't really a standard when it comes to values. Sometimes devs make your starting dagger deal around 5 damage, while others will make it do 30. It all depends how the dev goes about balancing damage numbers. Now, aside from making me question the in-universe power levels of each game and who the strongest song character is based on stat value, this also ties to the primal human joy that its number go up. When you get a new weapon or piece of armor, seeing it have a big number feels good. An issue I have with Return to Melanaut and other games made by JC Bailey is that the highest number you may see on your armor, for example, is 3. I don't even recall there's a single weapon in their games that goes into double digits for a single stat. If there is, it's a rare case. According to JC, this was just easier to balance, and I mean, fair enough. Their games are more balanced than a lot of the ones I've played. For a casual playthrough, this doesn't really matter. It probably won't matter to most people. I didn't find myself needing to grind it all and Return to Melanaut, and in truth, I probably ran past a lot of enemies I should have been killing. I might have been underleveled when I beat the game. It's really not poorly balanced or anything, but I couldn't help but feel a little disappointed when I found a new helmet or pair of boots, and all it did was give me 1 additional point in slashing defense. It's not the first game to be on the more conservative side, but it honestly bugged me. Again, this is probably the most who cares complaint I've made in this entire video series so far, but I just had to say it. Now, I do actually have a more substantial criticism to make. I want to reiterate that I like this game, but this did feel weird. For such a relatively faithful recreation of Melanaut and Kingsfield 2, why were there no crystal flasks? The dragon fountain is here to heal you once you finally restore its power, but the iconic mechanic of bottling its water and using it as a renewable healing item is absent. It just feels like such an odd omission. I know JC can do it because they implement it in their next game, but it's not in the game it would make the most sense for it to be in. Part of me also wonders if it takes too long to turn the fountain on, and if it should be more easily accessible from the start, but whatever. Despite those perhaps overly critical nitpicks, in the end, Return to Melanaut is good. I liked how good of a recreation of the island it was, and I liked seeing familiar characters and locations. It's not the best Som game I've ever played, but it doesn't feel like it has any major problems. Everything just kind of worked, and I had a smooth, fun time beating the game without any problems or getting lost. Maybe you could argue some parts of the map could have been recreated better, but this is still a good effort. I feel the comparison to Dark Destiny is a little inevitable. Both games recreate the same map, but with Dark Destiny going for a more original spin on it. But if you wanted a more faithful recreation of that island from your childhood to have nostalgic adventures playing in, you could do a good job with Return to Melanaut. It may not be the best Som game in my opinion, but it's still good fun. It left me kind of excited to see where JC went after this. And, well, I guess we'll never see what JC actually developed next. It seems around this time, but before the next finished game, JC would work on and lose 2 projects. One of them a remake of Shadow Tower, and the other a project titled Kingsfield 5. Unfortunately, there's no playable version of either of these games. When I asked, JC said the laptop they were being made on stopped working, but they had also decided to just move on for them when their scope was getting a bit out of hand. I can't say what Kingsfield 5 would have entailed, but remaking all of Shadow Tower wouldn't be a small task, so maybe this was for the best. Instead, they decided to work on something a little bit smaller, an original game with an original map. This brings us to Heir of Granatyki. When I asked, JC said this was their personal favorite of the Som games they released, and I think I could generally say it's a bit better than Return to Melanaut. Heir of Granatyki is actually a prequel to Kingsfield 1. Granatyki is mostly known as the homeland of Kingsfield 2's protagonist, but before that, it was enveloped in darkness. Threatening the land of Verdite with the growing corruption, the king sends a platoon of knights led by Hauser Forrester, father of John Forrester, the protagonist of Kingsfield 1. Some time has passed, and the remaining knights have found themselves in a bit of trouble. They have almost no supplies left and need to find a way into the palace. You can talk to your son in the starting area for a nice cameo, and he advises you to find a way in while trying to scrounge up equipment. And so begins the first original JC Bailey Som game. Where do I start with Heir of Granatyki? I guess in general I'll mention both the no gold drops thing and the low stats nitpick are here once again. Not really important at all, but maybe a bit odd to first time players. But enough of all that. Let's be more positive this entry. Granatyki is a new place, and I finally get to see JC really flex their map design, aside from the very original area in the previous game. And you know what? I think they did a good job. The island doesn't have many diverse locations, but the actual level design is solid. I had no trouble finding my way around, but even if I did, JC put in some pretty good maps. I also like how the draw distance feels like a thick fog. When you start playing, you'll find yourself poorly equipped and really need to go around and find stuff. As you do though, you may start to notice, Heir of Granatyki is actually rather open. There isn't a direct path to progress, but a more open and interconnected world. Granted, you'll still find yourself needing to locate the same key items, but you may just do it in a different order than someone else. You'll still find yourself guided by the general strength of the enemies, but a good player who knows what to do could potentially play this game a bit more freeform than others. Consequently, this could also lead you to not check in certain rooms or areas until later, and it taking a while to get certain key items. I was getting pretty low on healing items before I found this fairy's feather needed to turn on the healing fountain. Depending on how I tried to play the game, it's possible I might have found it even later than I did. Is that good design? Is that bad design? I don't know. I think it's at least accurate to the original Kingsfield games, so it feels fair. At least JC included bottling the fountain water this time. Speaking of, it's been nice to see JC tie so many of their games to the series proper. I mean, I'm not big on Kingsfield lore, I can barely even remember all the names of important characters, but if I was, I bet finally getting to explore Granatyki and seeing references to so many characters would be really cool. But since I don't really play Som games for their story, how would I say Heir of Granatyki is as a game? JC described the game as their attempt to condense a Kingsfield game down to 2 maps, and upon reflection, that's pretty much what this feels like. It's a condensed Kingsfield-like experience, complete with a more open world, and requiring the player to look around and find things instead of just being guided along a path. Playing it might not feel as user-friendly as some other Som games, and it's not the most fancy or diverse in terms of locations or set pieces, but in terms of giving off the feel of Kingsfield, I think this does it. Dare I say, with its more open design and how many things I think are technically optional, Heir of Granatyki almost feels like it has some replayability to try and optimize your path through it. But of course, who would be crazy enough to replay a song game over and over again? I find myself writing the script and honestly having a hard time finding the right words to describe the game like it is in my head, but I think that does a decent job. Where Return to Melanaut felt like a nostalgic trip back to the island with some decent gameplay to support its standard formula, Heir of Granatyki feels like JC really coming into their own as a developer. I can see the vision of a more open designed song game, though I don't know if the engine itself is up for the task. I still don't think this is my favorite song game, or even my favorite game by this developer, but I could bet some people would find themselves quite enjoying Heir of Granatyki. But of course, that begs the question, what is my favorite JC Bailey song game? Well, we're on to the last game of the video, and it's dawned on me that I've accidentally made a weird trend. The second video ended on Trismegistus, a puzzle game, the third ended on Hearts Collide, more of an adventure game, and now the JC Bailey Chronicles is ending with Mystic Prelude. It's not as out there as the others, but to me, it certainly sticks out from the rest. For starters, Mystic Prelude doesn't take place in the Kingsfield world, but an original setting. We start the game playing as some guy who did something bad to the king, and now people don't like us. Either way, there's a tower of wizards nearby, and we need to do something about it. Mystic Prelude is a lot more puzzle focused than the previous games in this video. While there's still combat, there's less of it, and a lot more finding key items and using them around its singular small map. I guess this might not be puzzles to some, but I think you get the idea. This isn't a fighting focused game, but my biggest shock of all is that this game has gold. Gold is almost another key item, with you need to collect the limited coins in the game and trade them in for other things. Back to the initial point though, Mystic Prelude turned out to be my personal favorite among JC's song games. Maybe I've just played enough of these that my favorites are whatever box the formula to do something different, but I thought this game struck a good balance between combat, exploration, and light puzzle solving. But I think what really sealed the deal for me was a spoiler towards the end of the game. Not many song games I've played have moments I'd really qualify as genuine spoilers, but this did. Now, I'm not the spoilering type, and if you're curious, I'd rather invite you to play the game yourself for the around 2 hours it takes to beat it. All I'll say is that it's rare to see a change in the world state like this, and it happens so suddenly. The only other song game I can offhand think of with an equivalent moment is the true ending of Hearts Collide. I know I'm being vague, but let me reiterate the good points. Mystic Prelude is a smaller game consisting of one map and only taking a couple of hours to beat. It's got a good blend of combat, exploration, and puzzle solving, and it's honestly got a cool moment or two. Perhaps if you want something more in-depth, this won't be as appealing, but to me, this felt very well-rounded. It was a nice, refreshing game to end the JC Bailey Chronicles on. Maybe one day I'll take a look at other games he's developed, but in the meantime, I think I'm done for now. So ends another video, and so ends this lengthy block of song games. Parts 2 through 4 of this video series were all made at the same time, and I'm all songed out for now. I need a break. But still, I think I've come around to appreciating the engine more. Now that I've played so many projects, both the complete and the incomplete, I've started to see how different developers can leave their own touches on their games. It's been interesting to see what different devs focus on, or what crazy things some did in an engine that maybe it wasn't meant for. Either way, I hope this helps people appreciate this niche little community a bit more, and maybe even inspires some to give the games a try. Or hey, maybe it goes to show that even niche communities can output something quite interesting. There's still plenty of song games to go, but I've got other videos to work on for now, so I think it'll be a bit before I return to this topic. In the meantime, I hope you enjoyed watching, and I'll see you next time, eventually, on our journey through the Sword of Moonlight engine.